This is Right to Life Radio with John Girardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of the Right to Life of Central California. And now, here's your host, John Girardi.
As the deep voice man said, this is Right to Life Radio right here on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org. Joining me today to talk about, well, there's nothing to talk about, just an open Supreme Court seat, which happened after we could talk about it last week. Joining me to talk about it is Jonathan Keller from California Family Council. Jonathan,
it is
some big news in the pro-life world.
You know, John, this is the problem with these Friday night news dumps, is that you think that you've got everything lined up for your show and everything's good, and then chaos.
Chaos happens. So last week we weren't able to discuss this, but this week we are. Just last week, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. I mean, it wasn't a Friday news dump. She literally died on Friday.
Yeah,
so,
yes,
I mean, that wasn't, I don't think that was her plan.
Right.
So at any rate, after Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing, we now have a vacancy on the Supreme Court, and we have the possibility for the president to fill that seat, to nominate someone to that seat, and for the Senate to confirm whoever that person is. As of the time of this recording, the president has not announced his pick yet. He will be announcing his pick as of the time of this show, the president will be announcing his pick later today at 2 p.m. So
5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific.
Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. So,
but John,
keep your eyes out and keep your eyes and ears peeled for that news later on today. You can listen to that right here on Power Talk.
But I should say we're already hearing, as of this taping, strong rumors.
Yes.
I just saw a report a couple days ago, actually, from, what was her name? Maggie Haberman, Trump's favorite reporter for the New York Times.
Yes.
Saying, first off, it retweets someone saying, Trump, Lagoa is on my list for court picks, but no meeting is planned. So then Maggie Haberman says, literally everyone around Trump, including people who favor Barbara Lagoa from the 11th Circuit down in Miami, say it will be Coney Barrett, barring something dramatic intervening. But we wait to do the reveal.
There you go. So that looks like what it's going to be. It looks like Trump is going to pick Amy Coney Barrett, which is wonderful. Judge Barrett, in addition to being a great judge on the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals, was a professor at the University of Notre Dame Law School and was one of my professors. So I know her a bit, just a little bit.
Did you have classes with her?
I had a class with her.
Gotcha.
I think my brother knows her a little bit better than I did or do. I just had one class with her, and that was about it. But she was a great professor at Notre Dame, and she's herself a Notre Dame Law School graduate also. So that's a feather in the Fighting Irish's cap.
Now, is she like yourself, a double domer?
I don't think she went to Notre Dame undergrad, but she did go to Notre Dame Law School.
Okay.
So let's talk about this. So what is the possible impact of having Judge Barrett on the Supreme Court? What could happen? Well, for those of you who count your noses on the Supreme Court, and most pro-lifers have a sense of this, it looks like we had possibly a 5-4 split on the court, where we had 5 justices on the court nominated by Republican presidents. John Roberts, the chief, who had been nominated by George W. Bush, Sam Alito, another Bush appointee, Clarence Thomas, who had been appointed by George H.W. Bush, and then Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, Trump's 2 nominees. So 5 Republican appointees. On the left, there were 4. You had 4 justices. You had Breyer and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, both Clinton nominees, and you had the 2 Obama nominees, Sotomayor and Elena Kagan. And the nose counters would say, well, it looks like the conservatives are going to have it. It looks like the conservatives have the chance to do a lot of really impressive things, to overturn Roe v. Wade, to roll back all kinds of abortion law. Well, we saw this past June that 5-4 majority is not quite so solid, and specifically as it relates to abortion issues. John Roberts sided with the Democrat appointees on the court to basically strike down a Louisiana law passed by their Democrat governor, I'll note, and introduced by a Democrat state legislator, I'll note, a Louisiana law that would have put a bunch of health and safety restrictions on abortion clinics. John Roberts joined with the liberals to strike that law down, not because he thought it was unconstitutional, but for other stupid reasons, reasons having to do with stare decisis and not wanting to rock the boat, more or less. Stare decisis, which is Latin for abortion, has to be legal. It's not. It's my joke. So that was the landscape where we as pro-lifers felt like, gosh, we're always like one judge away from being one judge away. Well,
or John, as other people say, there are a lot of seventh votes to overturn Roe v. Wade, just not a lot of fifth votes.
Right. Well, and that may well be. It may well be a thing with Roberts where he doesn't want to be part of a 5-4 majority to,
especially of
knock down
all
abortion.
Males.
Yeah,
ruling against the court's two females.
Right, and that's sort of an optics thing, possibly.
Can I just say on that note, just
go for it.
I realize that we are not all about the identity politics. We
Sure.
we judge people on their ideas and their qualifications,
Right.
Not on their
On
demographic
their sex or
characteristics.
whatever. Yeah, sure.
But can I just say
But rear end.
that after having essentially 3 hard left female justices on the court, and having originally the first female Supreme Court justice being Sandra Day O'Connor, who was
A huge disappointment.
I mean,
and really not very conservative at all.
yes, she was a Republican, but she was so. I mean,
She was a Republican who graduated from Stanford. So
Yes.
you know,
I mean,
there you go.
You have
My
heard us.
apologies to any Stanford grads listening to this who are like, hey, there's some Stanford grads who are okay.
Well,
All right.
let me put it this way: she was the vote that she was the swing vote on abortion
In
during the
Planned
90s that made Anthony Kennedy look conservative.
Right.
And
She
you
was
know
even
our
more- she
deep
was-
affinity for Anthony Kennedy.
Right. She was way more liberal on abortion than Anthony Kennedy was. She basically ruled that it was unconstitutional for state governments or the federal government to try to even ban partial birth abortion, which Anthony Kennedy thought was completely nuts.
Yes.
So yeah, Sandra Day O'Connor was terrible. So it's great to finally have the possibility of a
Republican justice.
nominated justice who is actually going to rule in a pro-life fashion. That
Yes.
would be great. So
And I will say, John, one thing to her credit, to the just in deference, it's setting aside for a moment the ideology, because I think we could have a lot of discussions about
Sure.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg's ideology, and Kevin Williamson wrote a piece in National Review that a lot of people said, I can't believe how insensitive and horrible this is. But he wrote a piece that was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The title was Ruth Bader Ginsburg Didn't Understand Her Job.
right.
And the idea was Ruth Bader Ginsburg would have been a phenomenal legislator.
Yeah.
She probably would have been a great Speaker of the
Or
House.
senator or something.
I mean, she would have been great.
yeah.
But as a jurist,
Yeah, she's highly. I mean, she and the other liberals on the court did not view their job as a kind of value neutral thing. They viewed their job as pursuing a certain conception of justice, which frankly, I wish some of the I sometimes wish the conservative members of the court viewed their job as pursuing a certain conception of justice.
it's just frustrating
as
to
opposed
have
to, yeah, but
unilateral disarmament on that front is frustrating.
Right,
But I will say, set aside all the ideology. I thought President Trump's initial response was one of the most human, gracious
I was going to say
things.
he was like the most like in this whole thing. President Trump was the only person who like struck the absolute perfect chord
Yeah.
for how to respond to this person's death. Everyone on the left threw a conniption fit. Several people on the right were slightly ungracious in their barely restrained exultation.
Yes.
But yeah, Trump was actually really nice. He said,
was.
she led an incredible American life, and it's very sad to hear of her passing.
And I will say again, John, that this is something that's remarkable to see, because we hear so much from our friends across the aisle about how America is still this horrible, racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic. I mean, we're just
Yeah,
the worst country.
We got so many phobias.
We're awful.
There you go.
And yet, the really incredible thing was to see the level of progress in the United States. I did not realize this till I was watching some of the. It was actually Fox News did a phenomenal profile on her on Friday night. I was watching Shannon Bream and Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson. They did great stuff talking about this, but they pointed out the fact that when Ruth Bader Ginsburg graduated law school.
Mhm.
She was one of 9 women to graduate. She applied for a Supreme Court clerkship, and she was denied because she
Right.
was a woman.
Yeah.
So,
So she wasn't good enough to be a clerk, but she could actually be on the court herself. So
I mean, that's a huge kudos, America, to say how far we've come in the ability of, gender equality and everything else. So, with all due praise and deference, I will also say that I was listening to another radio host who was talking about, or he's a MSNBC commentator, Hugh Hewitt on MSNBC.
All right.
He talked about when he was in law school, he had his judge that he was clerking with got sick, so he got reassigned to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's courtroom.
Oh,
And he said
when she was a circuit court judge.
yeah, or on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. And he said, obviously disagree with her on all the policy, but she was incredibly gracious, super sweet to me and all the other clerks, and it was great to, it was just a wonderful time. So I think, John, we can disagree while still being gracious.
Right. And we did very seriously disagree with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I mean, she helped uphold an incredibly unjust regime of abortion law in this country. And if she had had her way, probably she would have put in place an even more unjust regime of abortion law than we have right now. She never saw an abortion. This might be kind of an exaggeration, but she seems to have almost never found an abortion regulation that she thought was constitutionally allowable. And she seems, so she had a very expansive view of how abortion law should be regulated. Interestingly enough, she disagreed with Roe v. Wade. She liked its final holding, the end result, but she actually thought that the reasoning the court took to get to its end result in Roe v. Wade was actually very poor. And if she had had it her way, she would have grounded abortion differently within American constitutional law, actually in a way that I think would, while I thoroughly disagree with it, I think it would make more sense than the court in Roe. The court in Roe was basically, their whole argument was just a bunch of hand-waving and yada, yada, and abortion's legal.
And I will also say, John, I got into a debate with one of my friends on Twitter over the weekend where he was saying, well, no, Amy Coney Barrett, she's horrible because unlike Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Amy Coney Barrett would be imposing her personal views of abortion on the law. And I'm like...
yeah, sure. As if Ruth Bader Ginsburg doesn't do that, or Breyer doesn't do that, or Kennedy, or any of these other people didn't do that.
And he tried to then point out. He goes, "Well, no, look. Roe v. Wade is actually neutral. That's judicial modesty because Justice Blackmun in that decision, they steadfastly refused to decide when life begins." And I'm like,
well, yeah. If you but if you allow people to abort any child, then you are effectively deciding that those lives don't matter. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, well, that was one of the classic lame aspects of Roe was the pretending as if they were taking a neutral position when really what they were doing was imposing on all 50 states the most radical regime, the most radically permissive regime of abortion law possible. So that was the great shame of Roe, and it's the great shame of Justice Ginsburg's career that, while you can make very strong arguments, she advanced causes for women and made all kinds of progress and gave new consideration to how we look at discrimination against women in the law. While she was fighting for equality in all of these senses, she was also fighting for this radical form of inequality for a whole segment of the human population. Now, so that's, Justice Ginsburg. There's a huge opportunity here with her passing, with the open seat on the Supreme Court. There's a huge opportunity here for the court to move from maybe 5 justices who are maybe not in favor of Roe v. Wade to moving to 6, what I'd like to call Robert's insurance. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the person who is widely viewed as the front runner, Judge Amy Coney Barrett, and we're going to look at some of the attacks that are being made against her for her. Already, the pro-choice forces are furiously attacking her to say that she's not qualified or that she shouldn't be on this court. Basically, the chief thrust of their argument seems to be that she's too religious. We'll talk about how maybe that'll backfire. and other aspects of what it could mean for the court to have a genuine pro-life majority. That is next. Right to Life Radio, back with you. A production, as always, of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org. Hey, 40 Days for Life is going on. 40 Days for Life. If you want to learn more about it, we have different groups of people going out throughout the week, out to our building right next door to Planned Parenthood, handing out literature, praying, and just having a presence there. If you want to participate with us, give us a call at Right to Life of Central California, 559-229-2229. We can set you up with another group that's out there, or you can get your own group organized to come out there. We love having you come, and we love supporting this wonderful ministry. All righty. We're talking about the vacancy on the U.S. Supreme Court. This is a huge moment, Jonathan, a huge moment because of how it shifts the balance of power on the Supreme Court potentially. It will give Republican appointees a 6-3 majority on the court, and it might be the thing necessary for allowing the court to finally overturn Roe v. Wade. One of the jokes I heard was, we were just talking about this guy the other day, Jonathan. The gentleman who had that horrible experience, he was nominated to the D.C. Circuit.
Oh, Miguel Estrada.
Miguel Estrada. Okay. Miguel Estrada was famously nominated. He's a great, brilliant lawyer, had been a clerk under Justice Anthony Kennedy. Eventually, he was nominated by George W. Bush to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. And a lot of people expected that he might be next in line to be nominated to a Supreme Court seat. And the Democrats were very afraid of this, as we later learned from emails exchanged among them. They deliberately wanted to target Estrada. They did not want Republicans to nominate the first Latin American justice to the Supreme Court. The Democrats would wind up doing that when they nominated Sonia Sotomayor. Miguel Estrada was nominated to the D.C. Circuit and was viciously, brutally attacked by the Democrats, and Chuck Schumer sort of oversaw this. And his nomination, I think, was eventually withdrawn, or he himself withdrew from the nomination. And the experience was so brutal, and there was so much mud slung at him, and his name was tarnished so badly. I think his wife actually wound up committing suicide.
I don't know if she committed suicide. I think she may have.
She may have just died.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was
sorry,
incredibly. It was incredibly tragic. And he's. You listen to him talk about it, and the personal contempt with which he holds Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden and Pat Leahy, all the Democrats at that time.
Yeah. So he was very justifiably, understandably salty about that experience. I mean, more than that. I mean, he was enraged by how deeply unfairly he was treated. Anyway, he's a brilliant lawyer, and he speaks for the Federalist Society quite often. And he had this speech one time where he was talking about the court, and he made this kind of sexist joke. He said, the women on the Supreme Court are going to make sure that Roe v. Wade doesn't get overturned. Even after Kavanaugh was nominated, he said the women on the court are going to make sure Roe v. Wade's not overturned. Kagan, Sotomayor, Ginsburg, and John Roberts. So he was throwing John Roberts in as a woman on the court, which was kind of sexist. But nevertheless, he was making the point that he thought John Roberts would not take the step of overturning Roe v. Wade. That if push came to shove, John Roberts was not going to overturn something like that in a 5-4 contentious decision.
Which, by the way, I believe Amy Coney Barrett herself indicated was probably the case when she was asked about Roe v. Wade. She didn't mention Roberts by name, but she said probably going to be chipped away at as opposed to wholesale overturned.
Sure. Now, the thing is, though, if Barrett is on the court replacing Ginsburg, that's a big switch. That's a big shift. Okay? And it gets us to a point where maybe Barrett can become our Roberts insurance. I don't think Roberts is likely to join a 5-4 court to overturn Roe. I think he's much more likely to join a 6-3 court, more likely to join a 7-2 court if he could get it. I don't know that we ever could. And I think that's really important because, you know, let's be frank. We have the precedent of Roe v. Wade, which let's recall again what Roe v. Wade does. Roe v. Wade does not simply say abortion's legal. What it does is it coerces all of the state governments around the country and the U.S. government in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Congress, to basically tell them, this is what your abortion law has to be. This is what the Constitution itself mandates that your abortion law has to be. You can't pass a state law saying, okay, in California, abortion in the third trimester is illegal. You can't do that. You have to have it regulated exactly the way the Supreme Court has demanded it in Roe and in Planned Parenthood versus Casey. Okay, so there's no leeway there because apparently the Constitution itself mandates this certain body of regulations, okay, this certain body of abortion law, and which is fundamentally false. There's nothing in the Constitution indicating that it protects the right to abortion. It is basically a whole gigantic edifice built on sand, which the liberal justices have just reinforced ever since Roe v. Wade and sort of changed the rationale, but continued it since Planned Parenthood versus Casey in 1992. So to have Barrett on the court, it wouldn't necessarily make abortion illegal overnight. What it would do is it would allow every state to regulate abortion the way they want. It would allow every state to say individually, okay, we, the state of Alabama, we want to ban abortion completely. We, the state of Louisiana, we want to ban abortion after, no abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy when fetal heartbeat can be detected. No abortion after this point. No abortion after that point. That is really what is at stake here. And I think with Judge Barrett on the court, it is far more likely that that will happen. Okay, we're going to dig into the politics of this and what the Democrats are threatening to do if the Republicans can get Judge Barrett confirmed, if she's the nominee, can get Judge Barrett confirmed before the election. We'll dig into that next. Back with Right to Life Radio. Thank you all so much for listening. Production, as always, of Right to Life of Central California, RTLCC.org. Thank you so much for listening and supporting us and all of our work. All right, Jonathan, it's time to get into the nitty-gritty. It's time to get into the politics.
That's right.
The politics of nominating a new Supreme Court justice. So,
all right.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg died at sort of an awkward moment. Her seat became vacant at an awkward moment in the political cycle. We're about 40 days away from the election. And when I heard the news that Ginsburg had passed away, I sort of started to think, well, is there enough time, like physically, for the Republicans to even nominate someone and get someone confirmed before the election? And I think the answer to that question is yes. Justice Ginsburg herself was confirmed very quickly after Clinton finally named her. And there have been lots of other justices who have been confirmed. So the basic process is the president nominates the person. The Senate then has hearings about the person in the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Judiciary Committee has a hearing. They gather information. Their staff gathers information about the nominee. They have questioning for the nominee. And then they have a vote on the nominee. Once the nominee is confirmed by the Judiciary Committee, it goes to the floor of the U.S. Senate, and the Senate has a vote.
Just as an FYI, John, President Ford in 1975 nominated John Paul Stevens.
John Paul Stevens.
One of the
liberal.
longest serving justices. I think, was he the longest serving justice?
I don't know. He served for a very long time.
He might have been the oldest one to retire, but he was nominated by President Gerald Ford, who...
Biggest mistake of the Ford administration.
He was nominated and confirmed 98-0 by the Senate. Mm-hmm. He was confirmed 19 days after being nominated.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be that long. Doesn't have to be that long of a process. So I think the Republicans can and will get the president's nominee confirmed before the November election. And I think it's actually really important that they do it before the election. I think you can't. I think the pressure on Republicans, if they lose the election on November 3rd, and especially if the Republicans lose the Senate on November 3rd, the pressure on them to not have the final confirmation vote for Judge Barrett during the lame duck session will be so great that I don't think Republicans will be able to withstand it.
Yes.
So, it would be very, very difficult for them to go through with that. So what are the politics of all this? Well, it looks like the Republicans can do it. They have the votes to do it. They have 51 senators who seem to be all on board. So we should note that the politics of this are different than the politics of the Kavanaugh nomination. Now, when Kavanaugh was named, You and I think we did like a little mini broadcast the day he was announced.
I remember sitting in this very chair.
Right. And we were both kind of a little bummed that it was Kavanaugh. There were other people who were possibly a bit more pro-life that we wanted, namely Judge Barrett.
Yes.
That was who we wanted. But in fairness to the Republicans, I'll say they needed to get someone who could come off as being a bit more moderate. Kavanaugh, while I think he's going to rule the right way, and he ruled the right way in the June medical decision, doesn't have much of an abortion track record at all.
Right.
Really not much of a track record at all when it comes to controversial stuff. So as a result, and here's the basic math is very simple. Republicans right now have 53 votes in the Senate, 2 of whom are pro-choice. Susan Collins from Maine and Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. Back when Kavanaugh was nominated, there were only 51 Republicans, including those 2 pro-choice Republicans. So you couldn't have someone who was totally baller, in-your-face, pro-life when you only had 49 pro-life senators. Okay, that you would need to convince Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins or Joe Manchin from West Virginia, probably the most amenable Democrat to the president's nominees, to vote for such a pick. So the Republicans had to be a bit more careful with the Kavanaugh nomination. Now, the Kavanaugh nomination kind of wound up blowing up in their face because of all these allegations against Kavanaugh, uncorroborated allegations, I'll note. But all of those, it wound up being much more difficult than anticipated. But he was only really confirmed because Susan Collins from Maine decided to vote for him. And that was a very significant moment. And it's a thing that still chills my bones that Susan Collins on the floor of the Senate, when she explained her vote for Brett Kavanaugh, said that she felt confident that Brett Kavanaugh would not vote to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Yes.
Which, as I said, it chills me to the bone. Now, with Barrett, they don't have to be as careful. They got 51 pro-life votes, and Mitt Romney has confirmed that he's open to having a vote on the nominee before the election. Lamar Alexander, who's kind of also a bit more moderate, confirmed he's willing to have a vote on the nominee before the election. I think Senator McConnell has done a very good job of counting all the noses in the room. You don't get to where he is in life without having the ability to count noses, and he's very good at it. So the Republicans in the Senate can pretty much nominate whomever they want, and the Democrats really are powerless to stop them. So they can get it done before the election, and I believe they will. So the next question is, well, what are the possible political ramifications? Now, we have talked on this show before this Supreme Court seat was opened. You and I have talked about on this show that the Democrats were rattling their sabers about the idea of eliminating the judicial filibuster in the Senate.
Yes.
Okay, so if you eliminate the filibuster rule in the Senate, this is basically the rule in the Senate that says you need 60 votes to advance most legislation, not the normal, 50 plus 1. The filibuster rule says in the Senate, for most things, you need 60 votes to advance legislation. So it encourages compromise. It allows the minority party to stop certain things that the majority wants to do. The Democrats, if they get a majority in the Senate, they want to abolish that. Okay, just let everything be a simple majority vote. If they do that, one of the things they can do is pack the Supreme Court. Okay, so packing the Supreme Court means adding more justices to the Supreme Court and then have your guy, your president from your party, nominate all those new justices in order to change its ideological makeup.
John, I don't understand why this is controversial. As many blue check liberals have pointed out on Twitter, this is a completely legitimate exercise of the party's constitutional prerogative. I mean, the last time that they did it was
yeah, the last time they did it was in 1869.
John,
that's when they landed on 9 votes on the Supreme Court.
That is only 160 years ago. I mean, come on.
And the last time anyone tried it was Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s, who everyone in American politics at that point said, nope, we're not going along with this, Franklin Roosevelt. You're basically threatening the whole fabric of the republic if you try to expand the number of Supreme Court justices, because this is the thing. You can just expand the number of Supreme Court justices. You don't need a constitutional amendment to do it. Frankly, it feels to me like something that should be set by the Constitution, but oddly it isn't.
Right.
You can just pass a normal law to change it. And it feels like to me, if one party, when they get into power, can increase the number of justices on the Supreme Court, then the next party that gets in power is going to do the same dang thing.
Yes.
And so the Supreme Court's not going to have any kind of stability whatsoever.
John,
it's just going to be part of the super legislature.
You don't understand, John, because this is in the year 2020. The word, if there's one word that sums it up, it's unprecedented.
It's unprecedented. It's unprecedented.
We have an unprecedented pandemic. We have unprecedented financial crisis,
Right.
unprecedented racial unrest, riots, and everything. John, come on.
It's unprecedented for Republicans to
Have
do something
6
intelligent politically.
But for Republicans to control 6 seats, and by control, I mean to have appointed.
Yeah. 'cause
For
God knows
Republican appointees
God
to
knows they don't
occupy 6 of the 9 seats, John. I mean, come on. That is, everyone knows the founders envisioned our current 2-party system with Democrats and Republicans.
They certainly envisioned parties.
Yeah.
They constantly invade against the dangers of political parties, and political parties did not actually get started until several decades after the founding.
But everyone knows that the Supreme Court is supposed to be balanced between these different factions.
Between the two artificial poles of American politics that are sort of artificially created. Yeah, so Jonathan is being, of course, facetious here. There is no such norm or requirement. Nothing is unprecedented about a Supreme Court justice dying, a president nominating them, a replacement for that person, and the Senate confirming that person. And there's nothing unprecedented about even doing it in an election year, especially when the Senate and the presidency are held by the same party. This has happened multiple times in American history. Now, when the Senate and the presidency are controlled by different parties, as was the case in 2016 when Antonin Scalia died, usually you wait until after the election because you've got this conflict. You've got the Senate. The American people have elected the Senate, which say one, or the American states, I should say, have elected the Senate, which says one thing, and the American people have elected a president who says another. So let's have the election to kind of sort things out. So, and that's the thing. There have been some persons, David French, Jonah Goldberg, David French and Jonah Goldberg, who both released the exact same op-ed column on exactly the same day at exactly the same time, saying the exact same thing, which is basically they're saying Republicans shouldn't get this seat filled before the election. What they should do instead is hatch a deal with the Democrats. We'll wait until after the election, and if we win, we'll fill it. But if we don't win, then we won't fill it during the lame duck session, and in exchange, you guys promise not to abolish the Senate filibuster and promise not to pack the court again. And pretty please do so with a bow on top. Which is like, let's just make it clear.
Yeah, look.
A commitment to...
Pinky promise.
Pinky promise, yeah. And then Joe Biden will die a few months into his presidency, and then Kamala Harris will be in charge, and she'll say the deal's off because I never made that deal.
I've altered the deal. Pray do not alter it further.
Exactly. She'll pull a Darth Vader. And if anyone doesn't think that'll happen, they're crazy. Okay, clearly Harris is much more open to this whole idea than Biden ever was. Biden, a year ago, said openly during one of the Democrat debates, I'm not open to packing the Supreme Court. I think it's a bad idea.
Despite your favorite mayor from South Bend openly suggesting that should be an option.
And Kamala Harris herself talking about, a court reform or something.
Yep.
Basically to create new circuit courts and to expand the number of justices on the Supreme Court to give the liberals more power.
And John, I'll say this. I don't think either you or I or many conservatives would be against some sort of judicial reform. I do
splitting
think,
up the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
The Ninth Circuit has freaking 27 justices. It's ridiculous. It should be broken up. It has way too much power.
Representing the entire Western United States, practically.
It's silly. There is a lot of judicial reform that probably needs to happen.
Reform. I love that reform.
But the idea that it would be, shoot, we did not get our way in this situation. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, instead of listening to lots of calls from liberals to retire.
In 2013.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, you had Erwin Chemerinsky, the dean of UC Berkeley Law School, that was begging, writing op-eds, pleading with her, please retire.
Now,
President Obama has been reelected. We still have a strong, at least a narrow but strong enough Democratic majority in the Senate. Please retire so President Obama can appoint your successor.
Right. And she didn't.
She did not. She refused. Mm-hmm. And at the time, there was a lot of laudatory, this is, isn't this so great? John, I've seen multiple tweets, anonymously sourced, saying, a lot of her former clerks
are
just
off.
like, we can't say anything for several years.
But they're so ticked off that she didn't retire.
They're just like, this all could have been avoided.
Yeah. So that's sort of the political thing. We'll dig a little bit more into the politics when we come back. Basically, why I think that the threats of eliminating the filibuster and packing the court by Democrats if Republicans get this seat filled with a pro-life justice, why I think those threats are why they're basically just paper tigers. That's next. Thank you so much for listening to Right to Life Radio right here on Power Talk. We've got, by the way, if you like this show, if you like the work of Right to Life of Central California, if you like our 40 Days for Life campaign, we encourage you to support us through the 300 Club. If you go to rtlcc.org, you can see the blue button at the top there for the 300 Club. It's basically a very simple, straightforward way for you to support us financially by giving us $25 a month. For $25 a month, you can help us continue our work. $25 a month, that's $300 a year. So it's a very simple thing. I want to thank some of the people in the 300 Club. I'm going to go to the A's, Jonathan. Just start with the A's.
All right.
Rosa Alvarenga, David Alvarez, Tom and Lori Anderson, Vitalina Armas, Rick and Janice Ashodian, Timothy Atmajian, Chris and Caroline Beeston, Brian Bedrosian, Denise Bentker, Doug Bennick, Myron and Mary Betancourt, Mary Bishop, Wayne and Carol Bitter, the Most Reverend Joseph Brennan,
Hey.
Vera Bryan, Bishop Brennan, the Bishop of Fresno, Mark and Suzanne Burns, Sally Caglia, William and Sharon Carrasco, John and Veronica Coelho, Bill and Kathy Coit, Marianne Contreras, Cross City Church, Alicio and Nivea Cuellar, Brian and Lisa Delana, Stephen DeLorimer, Paul Dictos. All right, there we go. I'll
That's good.
go through that list.
Quite
Anyway.
a few Armenians in that list. It's,
Yeah, there you go. All the Ians. So
That's right.
anyway, thank you so much for your support of Right to Life. All right. I want to, in the last segment, we talked about this threat from many of the Democrats, although Biden has remained suspiciously mum on this whole issue.
It's so great. The
and
interview that
has
he
refused to answer the question of what something that would be the most significant thing of his presidency.
I appreciate the question, but I'm not going to answer it because it's a distraction. It's like,
It's not.
it's your party that's saying it.
Yeah, it's not a distraction. Basically, Biden was asked, "Do you support eliminating the filibuster in the Senate?" Which strips rights from the minority party in the Senate, basically says you only need 50 votes plus one to advance any legislation in the Senate. And if you do that, do you support expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court, which Democrats might be able to do? If Biden wins the White House and the Democrats take the Senate and they hold on to the House, they would be in a position to pass a simple law. If they eliminate the filibuster in the Senate, they could pass a simple law to expand the number of justices on the Supreme Court and nominate a whole big slew of liberal justices onto the court. Maybe add 4 seats to the court, which would give them a Democrat appointee majority. Biden refuses to say whether he would or would not do that. Now, here's the reason why I think this is a paper tiger. First of all, I don't think the Democrats have the votes, even to eliminate the filibuster. Probably don't have the votes to eliminate the filibuster, and probably don't have the votes to increase the number of justices on the Supreme Court. So let's understand. The Democrats would have to pick up, I think, at least 5 Senate seats in order to try it.
Yep.
Okay? Or 4 or 5 at least. Okay. Dianne Feinstein, our own senator from California, and an old hand in the Senate. Okay, she's been in the Senate for many, many years. And
Emphasis on old.
I didn't mean to be mean there, but she's served in the Senate a really long time. And she understands the ebb and flow of American politics, that sometimes you're in the majority and sometimes you're in the minority, especially in the Senate. And she said, no, I don't support eliminating the filibuster in the Senate. And I don't support packing the court, which by extension, there's no way you can pack the court unless you eliminate the filibuster rule in the Senate. So that's one senator who's not on board.
Yep.
And presumably, she's not the only one. Okay,
Yeah.
I refuse to believe that Feinstein is completely on an island
Yes.
and all the other 49 senators. You know, it might be a case where the Democrats only pick up 3 seats in this election, and it's a 50-50 split in the Senate. If you don't have Feinstein on board, you can't do it.
Yep.
So the odds of the Democrats, 1, winning the presidency, 2, winning the Senate, and 3, winning the Senate by such a margin, by picking up such an enormous number of seats, at least 4 or 5 seats they would need to pick up, which is a lot, that's what they would need in order to eliminate the filibuster in the Senate and pack the Supreme Court. And even then, guess what? A lot of the newly elected senators, they're going to come from purple states. Okay, They're going to be kind of moderate Democrats in the House who would have to vote on this, moderate Democrats in the Senate who would have to vote on this. And it's not going to be popular. Okay, it's going to be a nakedly partisan political move that'll be hugely destabilizing for our republic because now the Supreme Court is up for grabs every election. Every election, once you break that seal to expand the number of justices, there's no limiting factor. So that is so this notion that Republicans should just say, "Oh, we won't fill the court before the election and we'll make a deal. We'll let you guys fill it as long as you promise not to, pack the court later on." That's silly. This is like negotiating with terrorists. It's like negotiating with people who have this not to say Democrats are terrorists, but it's like negotiating with people whose demands are totally unreasonable, first of all, and not very likely to come about in the first place. So, no, let me tell you something. Pro-lifers have voted for a lot of candidates who call themselves pro-life, a lot of senators who call themselves pro-life, a lot of presidents who call themselves pro-life. They did it for a situation like this, to give a dominant edge to possibly pro-life justices on the Supreme Court so that we could overturn Roe. Now is the hour of choosing. That'll do it for us. This has been Right to Life Radio on Power Talk 96.7 AM 1400, a production of Right to Life of Central California, rtlcc.org.